welcome to another episode of the WealthRabbit podcast. I'm Charles.
And I'm Jason.
Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about the tax benefits of retirement plans. So if you're a loyal listener to the WealthRabbit podcast,
If you're a bad bunny.
or if Jason likes to call you bad bunnies,
Yeah.
then you already know all this stuff.
You might.
I mean, but heck, why not a refresher?
Yeah.
Why not a refresher? So tax, in general, you would refer to a retirement plan as a tax advantaged plan.
Yeah.
Because your assets are growing, tax deferred. You're
That's
not
right.
You're not paying any taxes. They're growing in value. You're not paying taxes on that.
Yep.
Until
Until you take it out.
you take it out, or
For a traditional.
or not if you're Roth.
Yep.
Let's talk about the contributions. So pre-tax versus post-tax contributions. So that's traditional versus Roth.
Yes.
Traditional plan, you're getting
Yep.
you're getting an
tax
advantage
deduction
now.
now. Then it grows tax free, and then when you take the money out, you have to pay tax on it. Roth, you don't get a tax deduction now,
Right. So
but it grows tax free, and then when you take it out, you don't ever have to pay tax on it.
Right.
Assuming you reach 59.5.
Right. And your advice for traditional versus Roth is almost always Roth, unless you're in a very high tax bracket and you anticipate being in a lower tax bracket in
Yes.
the future.
And your age.
And
If
your
you're
age.
older.
If you're very close
If you're
to
older and
retirement.
making a bunch of money, like, it made sense to do a traditional.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, if you're young,
Yeah.
Roth is normally the way to go.
Yeah. Because, if you calculate, if you plan to, if you're not retiring in the next 7 years, then you anticipate that whatever you're putting in is going to be doubling in value.
Yeah.
It's,
Well, I would say in general, too, like our tax rates are relatively low in the history of tax rates. So we don't know what they're going to do. But in general, I would anticipate them being higher in 20 or 30 years. We don't know. But
yeah.
if we did, then that would be an easier calculation to make.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're never upset if you're having investments grow tax free.
Right. It's never a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's so annoying how they're growing tax free. So
Unless you hate making money.
it's just like so upsetting. And I know there's probably a few of you out there that just hate it.
The good bunnies.
Those good buddies. They're the good buddies.
That's what we need Caleb right there.
Good buddy, yeah.
That's why he's here.
You didn't introduce me this time, and
Oh,
you didn't
yeah.
tell him. You didn't give me ground rules. So
Yeah,
I'm
that's
just
true.
gonna talk.
He's allowed to
Just-
talk whenever he wants.
Free reign. Caleb's got free
We
reign on
screwed
this
up.
one.
We screwed up real bad.
And tax savings on current income. So that'd be, the traditional, you'd recommend that in few situations where you're.
Yeah. It depends. A lot of clients just want to save money now.
Yeah.
Then there's definitely value for that. Like, save money now,
Yep.
let it grow. We don't know what the future is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a good,
Yep.
as long as you're doing something.
Right.
Like, I'd rather you do it the most you can
Right.
into either of those, and then worry about.
Right. The most important
Yeah.
thing is doing something, right? Is getting something in there, whether it's pre-tax or post-tax. How are 401ks versus IRAs? Is there any tax difference on that, or it all comes down to traditional versus?
There's
Roth?
no like major tax difference as far as what you take out. There's in the details. There's different, like when you can take stuff out, when you can
Treatment.
contribute to stuff, whether you can do.
It's mainly the contribution
Yeah,
limits.
there's a lot of complications with retirement stuff, but in general, tax.
From the employer side, is there a tax difference between 401k
So the
or Simple IRA?
employer gets a deduction. Almost always the match
Mhm.
is traditional because the employer gets a deduction. Now, they've since changed that where you can do the match as a Roth, but that becomes taxable for the employee at the time. So that's a little more complicated. But in general, for the employer, when you put money into an account, that's a deduction, and that's why it's
Well, that's a big move.
traditional.
Yeah, the idea of a match being Roth. That's the long. The
And the
general
employee
standings.
normally has to elect to do that, and we haven't. That's new. That just started in 2024. We haven't seen that really happening yet, because most employees don't want to pay tax
Right.
on money that
Right.
they're getting.
Right. It seems like it would be an advantage, though. You pay a little tax now, but you can have whatever that match is grows
Yeah,
tax deferred. So, So that's something that it is currently an option for people?
It's currently an option.
Employers and employees have to opt for that? Or is it something that each employee...
It depends on the plan. It has to be written into the plan.
Yeah.
And normally the employee has to opt in to do it.
Okay, gotcha.
Because it is taxable to the employee.
Gotcha. But the employer receives the same benefit regardless of how the employee decides to? Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that was a new thing under Secure Act.
Yeah. I'm
2.0.
I want to figure out that myself. Employers, the kind of incentives that employers get.
Yes, you get that tax deduction. So whatever you put in is a tax deduction for the business.
Gotcha.
You also, there's tax credits. There's startup tax credits. So if you're starting a new plan, 401k, simple, anything that's a qualified retirement plan, you get a tax credit. And there's a couple different parts of the tax credit. There's for the plan administrative costs. So like for WealthRabbit, whatever you pay, you basically get credited that.
Right.
Because our fees are low. So it's up to, I think, $1,500 a year or something but our fees will most likely be lower than that.
Gotcha.
So you get that. There's also a credit for the employer portion. I forget how much that's up, but I think it ends up being about $5,000 you can take. So that's big. So you get a deduction, you get a credit. You can't take both, so if you get but still, it's a good. It gives the employers for the first couple of years cash to help set up these plans. There's also one for auto enrollment. So if you set up your people on auto enrollment, which means like they're automatically enrolled in the 401k or the simple unless they opt out, whereas normally it's an opt-in. You get an extra credit for that. I think it's $500 or something like that too.
Interesting. How would you recommend somebody maximize their tax benefits? Whether
for employee?
Yeah, for an employee. So
it depends on, there's a lot of different factors. Depends on your age, depends on how much money you're making, how much your family, most likely if you're married and you're filing jointly, so you have to take your spouse's income into consideration. So it just depends on what tax bracket you're in and what you should do, and your age. Because if you're 25 and you're making, you're in the highest tax bracket, I would still say it's better to do a Roth. But if you want to do a traditional, I wouldn't blame you necessarily because you're in the 37% bracket.
Right.
So it just depends. There's a lot of variables.
Okay. And we haven't talked much about catch-up contributions. That's something that's available for people in a certain age bracket?
Yeah. So basically the government's like, you need to be saving more. So we're going to allow you to do that. Okay. So the max with simple $16,500, and then they have a catch-up. I don't remember the exact amount. It's a couple $1,000 that you can do in addition to that. So that just allows you, when you get to that age, you can do more. And then they have a new catch-up with Secure 2.0. When you're between 60 and 63, you can do an additional catch-up. It's a double catch-up. Gotcha. So now they have a second catch-up. Okay. 2 catch-ups.
Oh, 2 catch-ups.
Not to make it more confusing. Nice. But so, yeah. So,
a lot of catch-up.
So basically the theory behind that is like, hey, you're about to retire. You need more money. You haven't been doing a good job.
Gotcha.
Shame on you.
But anybody can take advantage of it.
Anyone can take advantage. That's right. And it's the year you turn 50. So if you turn 50 on December 31st, you can do it for that whole year.
Gotcha.
So that's something you want to keep in mind. And normally the employer has to like press a button on their payroll to turn that on. So just make sure you tell your employer, hey, I'm 50. I want to do the catch up.
Gotcha.
Or 60. I want to do the double catch up.
And in general, when you're doing these kind of forecasts, considering, how much you should be saving, things like that, you would factor in like what you expect the market's going to do, which you average 9% a year, and on average.
Yeah,
if you're keeping up
I would
with
say
the market.
that if you go onto a retirement planning software, they'll put in a number for what they think the market's going to do. They normally normally be conservative and say 5% instead of 9%, and then we'll put in 2 or 3% for inflation, and that's how we'll calculate your goals.
Yeah.
And then we can show you different ones, like if the market goes 9%, and basically there's all these the software runs all these simulations.
Gotcha.
It's called a Monte Carlo simulation. Basically, the best case, the worst case, and they run tens of thousands of
variables,
and calculations and figure out, okay, this is the most likelihood outcome of that.
Yeah. And you'd spoken before about a goal-based retirement strategy. Do you start with like what somebody's currently spending right now in their life, and you want to look at like whether you think your spending is going to be more or less in a retirement situation?
Yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you're good savers, then you can retire earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're a bad saver,
the bad bunnies are good savers.
And like the goals, yeah, exactly. The bad bunnies are good. It's very complicated, our whole system. We made it like the government. We call our listeners are bad bunnies, but they're actually good.
They're actually really good. Yeah.
But if they're good bunnies, they're bad.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
bunny,
saying?
Yeah. You want to be a bad bunny.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors in like, because if you're married, it's like, do you want to pay for your kids' weddings and college, and are they going to go to private school?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't always know that. So we try to plan for all the outcomes. Because remember, if you have two kids, one of them will go to a $70,000 a year school, and one of them will not. But you don't know which one it's going to be. And if you get lucky, maybe neither of them do. But if you get unlucky, there's two of them. So it just depends on, there's a lot of factors that go into stuff. And, health is a big factor too, like planning for health, making sure you have the proper insurance, long-term care potentially. Like all that's important.
Right.
So there's a lot of factors that go into us making a good plan for you, and you guys feeling confident that the plan is right.
If somebody wanted to opt in for a simple IRA right now with WealthRabbit, how would one go about doing that?
Oh, it's super easy, Charles.
Oh, is it?
Oh, yeah. You just go to the website, wealthrabbit.com, sign up. Should take the employer, obviously has to sign up first to set up the plan. Should take 10, 20 minutes. Yeah. And then they email the employee, should take them 5 minutes, and then you're set up. It's easy. And I would say, for the other stuff, if you need a IRA, we'll have IRAs eventually, but for right now, there's a lot of options for IRAs out there. But I would say in general, when you're selecting a provider like WealthRabbit, there's a couple things as an employer you want to ask yourself. It's like, hey, is the software good? And like, what are the underlying investments? Like, am I going to be putting myself in good stuff? Like, do these people know what they're doing?
Right.
Like, how are they making money off this?
These are all good questions.
Yeah. These are important questions, because a lot of times you go to your financial advisor and you say you're going to pay them 1%, and then they put you in mutual funds that you have to pay another 1.5%, and they're getting commission off that.
Gotcha.
And you end up paying 2.5-3% for a mutual fund.
You're losing 2% of your gains each year.
Or 3%. Yeah, that's a lot. So like, that's not how we run our investment advisory practice. So when we set up WealthRabbit, a big thing was like, hey, we want good investments for low cost. So we charge 50 basis points, which is a half of 1%. Right. And all of the funds are in low cost ETFs. So they average probably 10 or 20 basis points. So you're all in for 60, 70 basis points, 0.6%, 0.7%. Like, that's good for an active managed fund designed by BlackRock. So that's like, we designed this whole thing because we want, we want our customers to get good service from this. So the software side, it's like, hey, we make the simple, easy to administer, easy to use, so you can spend more time running your business. And then on the back end, because most likely the employer is an employee too, like you're going to be invested in good stuff, low fee stuff, and over time you're going to save money on that.
Yeah. And you hinted at it there a little bit, and we haven't talked about it too much in the past, but the idea of like, when they're opting into a plan, they're not just like picking stocks or picking certain funds, and you're not really picking.
Yeah, and that's
funds.
Another thing too.
You have a short list of
well, we as WealthRabbit are actively managing the fund, so we are picking stuff for you. But we have 5 portfolios, and another advantage of us is like we've created 5 portfolios that are like good based on risk tolerance. A lot of times, if you have a simple, the employee has to go in and they have like 50 different options to pick from. Right. And like, how is the employee going to know how to, like, they have no investment experience. Like, they're not going to know what to do. Right. And then they either come to you and they're like, hey, what should I do? Well, that's like, hey, you shouldn't be giving investment advice. Or they go to the financial advisor and they say they can't give any of the advice because that's, you're the person who has to give the advice. So that's why we've set it up where it's like, hey, we've kept it simple for simple. It's like, hey, 5 different options based on risk tolerance. They're all good, but there's riskier ones. Just means like, hey, we're tracking, it's more stocks, less bonds. The ones that bonds are normally, more conservative.
Right.
So we're just saying, we asked you a few questions that say, hey, what's your risk tolerance? Are you scared of the market? Are you not scared of the market? Are you good at investing? Would you rather gain 2,000 or only lose 1,000, or are you happy with a $20,000 gain, but you might lose 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever? So we ask you these questions, and then based off that, we come up with the risk tolerance for you. And that's what we put you in.
Gotcha. And these are all funds that are BlackRock funds?
So BlackRock is the person is the firm that designs the funds. They're not all BlackRock funds.
Oh, okay.
They're different ETFs that track different parts of the market. So an ETF is just, it's like a mutual fund, but it's lower cost. So it's basically, it's a fund that has a bunch of different stocks in it that track different sections of the market. So we might have an ETF that tracks pharmaceuticals, or an ETF that tracks mid cap, middle-sized business versus large business versus small businesses versus technology. So a lot of different stuff. We do a bunch of different ones of those. I think I don't want to say how many ETFs are in this particular portfolio, but I would say 10 to 15, somewhere around there. So it's tracking different parts of the market for you, and we're actively managing it, which means that like if there's a big event and we need to reallocate. We reallocate for you. Like, you don't have to do that ever.
Gotcha. Well, it's been a pleasure, Jason. Thank you for...
It's always a pleasure.
Thanks for the information. This has been great. If you guys have questions about these, please send them in to support@wealthrabbit.com.
We'll answer them live.
We'll answer them live.
Tape recorded live.
On our next live broadcast.
Yeah. When are we going live on the TikToks?
We're going to go live
on the YouTubes.
I mean, people are demanding it. I keep saying, no, not yet. Not yet.
We got to keep them waiting.
Yeah, right.
Can you imagine?
Right. I mean, they love it.
The WealthRabbit podcast is a production of WealthRabbit, located in sunny Rock Hill, South Carolina. WealthRabbit is the first digitized platform designed to make simple IRA management effortless. We're on a mission to empower small businesses to invest in their team's financial future without the headaches. No hidden fees, no complicated processes, just retirement planning made simple. Go to wealthrabbit.com now to learn more. The views and opinions expressed on the WealthRabbit podcast are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect or state the opinions of WealthRabbit. Comments and remarks on this podcast should not be construed as tax, legal, or other investment advice. Please consult your tax, legal, or investment professional. All investments involve risk. Past performance does not guarantee future results, including the risk of loss. Investments are not FDIC insured.